How did soldiers go from throwing primitive hand bombs to grenade launchers that could yeet laser-guided munitions 2,000 meters away? The earliest use of grenades in combat was in the 12th century when Chinese soldiers hurled down what was called thunder crash bombs from the top of the Great Wall in China onto their enemies' heads. The grenade shells were made of cast iron and filled with about 30 pieces of this thin, broken porcelain that was about the size of iron coins. Then they packed in about 4 pounds of gunpowder into a bamboo tube. The length of the fuse could be adjusted based on the intended throwing distance. Greek fire was an incendiary weapon used by the Eastern Roman Empire beginning in around 600 BC, when it was used to light up enemy ships. It's credited with winning the Battle of Constantinople. Ancient people talked about it like it was the javelin missile and end law of its time. Then, the wide brim hats of the 17th century infantry were tossed away to make it easier to sling grenades at the enemy. Grenade launchers were first seen on the Western battlefield in mid-1700s in the form of slings that could launch grenades further than they could be thrown by hand. In the mid-1700s, there were entire companies of troops with the specific elite job of grenadier. Only the strongest were picked for the role. With the advent of the rifle grenade, your grenadiers no longer needed to be swole. In World War I, II, and the Korean War, troops launched grenades using a mortar-like system. The US Army's World War II era M7 grenade launcher fired the M9 rifle grenade. The M7 was a tube-shaped device where one end slotted over the muzzle of the rifle and attached to the bayonet mount, while the other end held the grenade in place. The operator would load a blank cartridge into the rifle before firing it. Once the rifle was fired, it would use the expanding gas generated by the blank cartridge to propel the grenade forward. The M7 could launch grenades 200 meters instead of the 30 meters that people could throw with their hands. The grenade came in 3 variations. You had your anti-armor M9, anti-personnel fragmentation, which was the M17. You had your smoke grenades, the M22, for when you wanted to pop smoke ninja style. The M9 was made from a steel body that weighed 1.23 pounds and was filled with 4 ounces of pentolite. The tail contained the impact fuse and the stabilizing fin spot welded to the tube. According to the War Department Infantry Field Manual, the hollow-shaped charge of this grenade has remarkable armor-penetrating qualities, but in reality, towards the end of the Second World War, troops noticed it had a limited effect against heavy German tanks. And on top of that, they were inaccurate and time-consuming to set up and fire. This whole procedure requires the user to unload their regular ammunition, load in blanks, and then after all of that, you need to reload your regular rifle ammo to continue shooting. This takes precious time and eliminates one of your riflemen from laying down fire, a problem that they're going to have to address in future grenade launchers. In the 1950s, after World War II, the Army had some time to try to increase the firepower of the individual soldier, and so they jump-started research on Project Niblick. Colonel Rene R. Stutler, Chief of Small Arms Research and Development for U.S. Army Ordnance, decided a shoulder-fired launcher would be the best way forward. His deputy, Jack Bird, came up with a firing solution and demonstrated the theory with maybe the most crude prototype of all time. He stuffed a golf ball into a pipe and spring-loaded fired it on the Pentagon lawn to show how stable it would be. By 1952, the engineers determined a spherical 40mm projectile that had an explosive charge would do the trick. It would look like a hand grenade, basically. But after further testing, they realized a cylindrical 40mm projectile with the nose rounded would be more aerodynamic and would have better ballistics and could hold additional explosive volume. The US Army needed some kind of contraption to launch the thing though. Springfield Armory was asked to come up with the T-148 grenade launcher, which had a harmonica-style magazine and 3-round capacity, but it had reliability issues and needed to be scrapped. Roy Royale said, hey, let's just use the mechanism on Grandpa's old break-action shotgun and make it a single-shot break-action. This did the trick, and on December 15, 1960, the M79 entered full large-scale production. Its simplicity is the core of its design, with only 5 major parts: the receiver group, fore-end assembly, barrel group, and the sights. This was the first official grenade launcher model serviced by the US military. The M79 was truly a breakthrough in military technology, and for the first time in US history, the infantryman had an extremely lightweight and lethal grenade launcher capable of accurate and fast fire. It uses a low-pressure 40 by 46mm grenade. You have to remember how revolutionary it was. Unlike old grenade launchers, the M79 didn't need to be held to the ground and fired like a mortar. It had a safety feature so it wouldn't arm unless it had traveled 30 meters. grenadiers and could fire as many different types of ammo, including buckshot, like a shotgun. Aiming the weapon was more fine-tuned, with front blade and rear leaf sights giving soldiers accuracy up to 400 meters now. Because this filled the gap in capability, the M79 was known as the platoon leader's artillery. The grenade launcher was issued at the squad level, and coordinating was as easy as pointing at the target. No need to radio back to base for artillery or mortar fire. The M79 endured a ton of combat during Vietnam, first entering service in 1965. It gained nicknames like Thumper, Thump Gun, Bloop Tube, Big Ed, Elephant Gun, and Blooper, Can Cannon, and my personal favorite, the Australians called it the Wombat Gun. The M79 got these pet names from the distinct sound it made when firing. The M79 weighed just over 6.5 pounds when loaded, half the weight of the bazooka, and some soldiers would chop it apart to make it even lighter and easier to carry while on patrol in the dense jungle environment. American troops had an overall favorable opinion of the M79, and it's still in use with many countries to this day. Today, grenadiers are integrated into each squad to provide indirect fire that they would only be able to get from mortars or artillery otherwise. But it takes calling back to HQ and coordinating over radios in order to get those assets, which there's still no guarantee they would even be able to support you in the first place. The China Lake never got a formal designation and was only produced in very limited numbers. In fact, 24 were produced, and they were all sent to special units, with 20 of them going to SEALs teams. The China Lake was named after the naval station where it was designed and was based off the M79, but took a different design note from shotguns by using a pump-action tube magazine. It weighs about 10 pounds and can hold 3 grenades in the tube magazine plus 1 in the chamber. Some accounts from SEALs said that they could shoot all 4 rounds before the first grenade hit the ground. The China Lake never saw wide service in the US military, and personally I think that's a missed opportunity. Interestingly enough, there was a grenade launcher that used extensively in the Vietnam War that you might have never heard of. In fact, more than 20,000 of them were made, but due to widespread reliability problems, they were removed from service in just 1 year. I'm talking about the XM148 that Colt was contracted to build and ship in Vietnam December of 1966. The grenade launcher was a great concept, but poorly executed. It was a complicated weapon to disassemble. The leaf sight was mounted awkwardly to the left side and it got hung up on trees and vines. It used an awkward plunger to manually cock the hammer. The plunger is difficult to reach and requires something like 30 pounds of force in order to cock. And then there's the long, awkward bent rod that wraps around the magazine and acts as the trigger. The idea of the trigger was that you could fire the grenade launcher without taking your hand off the pistol grip of your rifle, which sounds good on paper because even in the modern day, soldiers are taught in basic training to keep their firing hand on the weapons at all time, but the extended trigger would get caught in heavy brush and cause negligent discharges. Really bad and super dangerous. But there was one aspect the Army loved. The XM148 was an underslung grenade launcher that was attached to the barrel of a rifle. It weighed half the weight of the previous M79, and having the launcher attached to the weapon meant that your grenadier would still have a rifle as opposed to carrying only the M79. Colt manufactured 27,000 of the XM148s, many of which were used in Vietnam. Even though they tried to fix all of the problems, the Army ended up recommending it be removed from service entirely. 2 years later, in 1969, the beautiful M203 would finally be issued to frontline troops in Vietnam.
In engineering development is a grenade launcher, which attaches to the standard M16 Army rifle.
The M203 was essentially a simplified XM148 made by IAA. It was a stopgap measure that was completed very fast in just a couple of years. It had a 15-inch long barrel and it weighed 3 pounds, with an effective range of 350 meters. The M203 used less parts than the XM148, with a simple takedown method, and this helped the launcher be much easier to maintain, instead of the awkward plunger of the XM148. The M203 cocks itself when you open the tube. An additional ergonomic improvement was the leaf sight added to the top of the weapon as opposed to side-mounted leaf sight of the XM148. Even though the M203 was much beloved by troops, it was not without its share of problems. After repeated fire, there was a chance that the M203 would vibrate enough to cause the system to completely fall off. This left you standing there with an almost useless grenade launcher in your hand because it couldn't be easily fired as as a standalone. The pump slide action, while it's very easy to operate, has the downside of limiting the kinds of grenades to short ones, which was becoming a bigger problem as new technologies allowed for more sophisticated types of longer grenades. This led to the development of the newest grenade launcher in the US Army's inventory, the H&K M320. In 2004, the Army announced they had a requirement for a new 40mm grenade launcher. It had to be safer and more reliable and more accurate than the M203. H&K won with the M320. It weighed half a pound more, even though it was supposed to weigh less, but its barrel was 2 inches shorter. The side breech loading mechanism allowed for the M320 to be capable of firing the advanced Raytheon Pike missile ammunition. It's like a mini missile for infantry. This round allegedly increases the range from 350 meters to 2,000 meters. The Pike guided missile uses a digital semi-active laser seeker to guide itself to within 5 meters of the target. This is operated with a 2-man shooter and spotter team. Or the grenadier can operate it alone by lasing the enemy after firing. The Pike round uses a small propellant to kick it out of the tube, and then the motor ignites and carries it to the target. It weighs 1.7 pounds and it has a 10-meter lethal radius. This gives Grenadier a capability in between the RPG and the expensive Javelin. From slinging grenades at the enemy 75 meters away in the 17th century Europe to launching guided missiles 2,000 meters away, the grenade launcher has come a long way. Future systems might be like the XM25, which is a dedicated grenade launcher platform that fires a magazine of rounds that airburst behind the enemy while they're hiding behind cover. One thing is for sure though, as long as there are light infantry in the fight, it's likely there will always be a need for yeeting grenades at the enemy. If you guys have another minute, then I think you'll really like this video about hypersonic missiles. Check it out if you get a chance.